Hi, good evening. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We also coming to you live on YouTube. If you dare, you could be able to catch it on the Guyanese Critic page, or you could also get it on Daybreak News TV. And wherever you are, good night, good morning. I hope that you guys, if you're driving on the roadways and you're tuning in to us, I hope that you remain safe, observe the rules of the road. We have to, can't lose any lives. Tonight, as always, we will continue with talking about the development of Guyana. How well are we building capacity in this country at this juncture, at this crossroads of ours when we're dealing with oil and gas? But before we head into it, and I introduce my co-host, Freddie Kissoon, a couple of things that we will see. One, I was over the weekend, I happened to travel the Grove Diamond area and I was heading to the airport. And I must say that I'm very, very unhappy with the management of that entire project there. If you're doing a contract, and let me make it very clear, if you sign a contract to build a piece of road and you have to do a diversion, you have to create a diversion that you don't create the kind of impact that is going to slow traffic. And if you're going to have potholes in those diversions, especially with the volumes of traffic that is on the East Bank roadway, people heading to the airport and all over the place, you're going to create problems. The Grove area happens to be one of that. That Grove area is a terrible, terrible thing as they seek to widen it. The actual roadways in itself causing traffic backups every single day. I'm really, really sorry for those people. It is horrendous. It's unacceptable. Somebody needs to rein in these contractors, and we need to rein in these supervisors as well. You go up to Hope on the East Bank of Demerara, same problem. But we're going to stop here because these are some of the nonsense that happen in our country. Nobody's saying anything, and I presume you can't have the minister on the ground or the president visiting all the time to see what these people are doing. Somebody needs to be doing their job. And it's unacceptable that somebody should be in the line 1.5 hours that is just crawling for a couple of hundred yards. It can't be. Where in the world that you have a developing country that you have these kind of things? And we got to call these people out. When you see contractors who decide that they want to do something, and you have supervisors who are not paying attention to the job, the engineers not paying attention to the job, unacceptable. 0 points for you guys. You got to do better than that. Tonight I want to say good night again to my friend, co-host, Freddie Kissoon, who's going to introduce you to somebody. And it's not often that we have people on our show that who are ladies, that's one, and two, career folks in an industry highly regulated, in a place where we need capacity. Freddie Kissoon, over to you, sir.
Good evening, good morning, good day to all of you. Before I introduce our special guest, a very talented woman entrepreneur, I have her CV in front of me, and it's mind-boggling. Let me just touch a little bit on Gildarie, what Gildarie said. I took my wife 2 Sundays ago, driving up to go up to Diamond, and I told Gildarie, but 3 times I will pass by him. We couldn't. We were on the East Bank Road and couldn't turn into Diamond, and people in Diamond couldn't turn to the East Bank Road. Just we would have a simple traffic cop there regulating traffic. It would have taken a long time, but nobody would not have. You would not have been afraid that the cars come in and go, and nobody maintaining order. That's number one. Number two, again to touch on Gildarie, I think the Ministry of Public Works is responsible for some delinquency in those when the product is finished. I live on the UG Road. UG Road begins from the Atlantic Highway and ends at UG. Now, the government gives contractors a job to put a pavement. It needed a pavement, of course. That is such a busy place. So they put a pavement on the western side of UG Road. So you now have a pavement there that runs from the Atlantic Highway to the railway embankment. The contractors in putting the pavement left big holes in the road itself. So when you're using that road, there's a series of big holes. And if they do not fill those holes, it's going to get wider. Now, when the contractor finished with that pavement, someone from the ministry of Public Works had to go there, look to see the pavement was completed nicely, no safety problems, and look to see how the road was butchered. But it seems to me the contractor built the pavement and gone his way, and that nice road that had no what you call potholes, large potholes, now have them. That Gildarie just talk about. You cannot anyway. Our guest this evening is a woman entrepreneur, and it is just elevating to have the Guyanese people see the history of such a person. When we started this program, we said that we would like to feature unsung heroes, and we would like to give publicity and provide a platform for people who are important to this country, but you don't hear their names all over the place. So we give coverage to all the small political parties that the newspapers do not give coverage to, and we will have them again. And then we said that there are small business people who, through grit, work themselves up and are contributing to the physiology and biology of this country. And we will continue to do that this year. We don't care if we put someone and we don't get the viewership as when we have a minister or when we have the opposition figures. Our motto here is to give publicity to people who deserve it. Our guest this evening is, as I said, a woman entrepreneur. I have her CV in front of me, and it is really impressive. Her name is Nalini Chanderban. She is the Chief Executive Officer of a very unique institution in Guyana, which is not found elsewhere in the Caribbean. Despite all the largeness of the Jamaican and Trinidadian economy and the wide expanding tertiary education institutions, only Guyana has an internationally accredited aeronautical engineering school in the Caribbean. The person who heads that school is our guest this evening, but she will talk about 30 years of trying to get to the top, and she is at the top. I don't want to take up much time reading her curriculum vitae to you, but during the program, we will obviously make recourse to her curriculum vitae. Ms. Chanderban, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Then I'll give that. I am the outsider here. Leonard Gildarie is a business person. So I will leave him to ask the first question.
Okay.
Thank you very much and welcome. Like I said before, I am really impressed. Anybody who talks about building capacity in Guyana and wants to play a role in building this country. I'm patriotic to the point I would fight with anybody who has a diverse or who has a different view from that. You stand head and shoulders, maybe above some people in this industry, in the aircraft industry, in the aeronautical industry. And I want to ask you, Ms. Chanderban, how difficult was it for you to claw your way to the top? You literally wrote the books in Guyana for that.
It was not difficult because it was a unique position. It was not a challenging position. You have in aviation different industries. So you have the air operators, and then you have maintenance, and then us. We're the ATO, the Aviation Trading Organization. So it's a sort of cycle in the sense that you get help from the other organization. One feeds into the other. So it was not. There were no clashes, or more like complementing in a sense that you had to relate to all these organizations. And this is how the school came about, because there was a need for trained persons. And back then when the school started in 1993, it was like all other sectors. You want somebody trained, you send them overseas. So then you lose them during that time. And then you have a need here. And then it's only one person. And then the risks that involves when that person is not available. So The industry is heavily regulated, and you have to have those planes flying released to service by a certified aircraft engineer. And this is the role of the school. So I was sort of put in a unique position of starting off as a typist, literally creating the question banks and writing the procedures manual and the workshop procedures manual. But you had little pockets of training in the each operator back then, and this when the school came about, they decided to say, let's put all the resources together and focus on one school. So this is how it started, and I came on in '96, 3 years after.
And you started basically from a typist.
Well, I was part-time typist.
Right.
I was engineering secretary in one of the maintenance organization.
Uh-huh.
My boss then, George Lloyd, the engineering school workshop is named after him. So I came on to work with him, and I had an aircraft maintenance manager where I was engineering secretary too. So I was sort of involved in engineering and helping with, administrative work. But then when we got help from the British Embassy, the VSO service, that we got our first principal, and he helped, and I helped him too. And we were able to create all the manuals and get the school officially certified on the Civil Aviation Authority.
Before Freddie comes on, let's put that in context.
Yeah, go ahead.
Guyana has one area, the Stabroek Block right now, in which we're producing oil from. Imagine we had to get aircraft companies, helicopter companies coming into the Guyana, and I think there are a lot of applications right now. Imagine you have 4 like that, the demands for the services that you would need to fulfill the needs of those different oil blocks. Imagine the kind of regulations and the kind of eyes that have to be placed on that industry. It is heavily regulated right now by the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority. But imagine a couple of years, maybe 2-3 years from now, helicopters flying all over Guyana and planes in and out of this country. The kind of training, the kind of capacity. Freddie Kissoon, because I'm going to put this in context a little later.
Okay, sure. Ms. Chanderban, I really do like your curriculum vitae. And what I'm impressed with it is how you started with your CXC and you climb your way to an MBA from the UK. And I looked at the amount of places you worked at and the training you would have had. And I can't help but describing you as an unsung hero. Now, when we pick up the papers, when people look at this program, they are big names and people rush to hear what they have to say. But behind Guyana, behind the physiology and biology of Guyana, are people, public servants, small business people, who work their way, achieve something, but you don't hear their names. And you don't normally hear people refer to Nalini Chanderban. But if they see your curriculum vitae, now, you were trained by Transport Canada in Safety Management System. You were trained in ISO 901 in Trinidad and Bywater Training Limited in the UK. You were trained by IATA, in case you don't know who's that, International Air Transport Association. And then you went into, from experience, into the workplace. And I see that you worked at what is now the EU mission in Guyana. And then the private sector commission, you worked with the Ministry of Education. But let's talk about the Aircraft Association, of which you're CEO. My question to you is, in a world of male chauvinism, did you feel the vibes or feel it in your vein that men felt that these positions that you were occupying, they should have had it?
No. And I say that because of me and my personality. I was able to get everybody to work with me and listen to me. And I'm almost always found in a room with men and the only female. In Trinidad, when we set up an arrangement with UTT, we assisted University of Trinidad and Tobago when they wanted to do this a couple of years back. The entire billboard was, huge, like 20 feet. And all the persons standing were all male, and I was the only female there. So what I'm trying to say is, sometimes when you're the only female, they listen to you. And that's what worked for me. Sometimes I might have to say something twice or maybe put it in writing. There are sometimes when you're frustrated, working with different persons, different departments, that you would have to maybe put it in a larger font, in different colors, have a graph when you're trying to say the same thing, and another person would put it on in black and white, and it's taken. But I had to prove myself, and I think over the years I've done that, especially with the quality management system that we're so proud of at Art Williams, because that was back in 2004 when nobody spoke about quality management system and ISO 9001. And my boss then, he was CEO, and he said, we have to do this, Captain Chansu, Malcolm Chansu. So when he said that this is what we have to do, and he rested down, the chief instructor said, well, you don't have time for that. That's a lot of work. You already have civil aviation requirements and laws and regulations, and then you're talking about quality management system, which is sort of, now that you know about this, is supplemental in terms of enhancing your operations, everything you do, making sure you do it according to set criteria and all of that. So it was hard to get people to buy in, but over time I was able to get everybody along, and I got the support. The board is mostly men, and there are a few female on it now, but things are changing.
I know in the aviation industry in Guyana, there's a couple of names that would come up. We have quite a few women pilot now, Freddie. It would be Anat Arjun, very famous name. I think her sister, Ferry Ali, I think it is, also a pilot, and we see some other female pilot would have been in it. But you have said a couple of important things. If we're talking about having a school in Guyana and you're training people to maintain aircraft, obviously the issue of safety comes into play. How easy, walk us through that, how easy it is to get Guyana to be certified, and the kind of work that went into make the Art Williams School, the Art Williams School, the kind of institution that had to be accredited, and recognized. What kind of work went into that?
A lot of work. But the thing is, it was not guesswork. Remember, the industry is regulated. So if you want to start a school, be it a flight school or it's licensed or dispatching or air traffic control or whatever, there are preset sections in the requirements that you have to adhere to. So it's a matter of compliance. And with Art Williams School, they were, required positions, required system, a quality system. And you would have different companies would have safety management system or quality systems. So it was not hard because you had the criteria set out already, and you had to work towards fulfilling that. And like I said, we got the help from the VSO, and we were able to create all these manuals. Now, that's what they call work instructions in ISO. But when we moved to ISO, Quality Management System fully, we had to create policies and procedures, and then you had the work instructions. So you had to have a buy-in from top management, from the board, and they're the driving force, and that's what happened, because they're the ones that say we must have it. Whereas the reverse happened in some companies, that you say you want it, but you don't have a buy-in with top management. So when you have that, they can help you with the vision and the mission and your objectives, and your so when you have those defined, it's easy to come up with the steps on how to get that. But it is a lot of work, because you have to understand the criteria. Now with ISO is another set of criteria. And then when we got institutional accreditation from the Ministry of Education, which we got in 2019, another set of criteria. But it sort of overlaps, because quality management system, when you follow ISO 9001, it's so comprehensive that if civil aviation asks for an internal audit, you've done it. And if ISO asks for an internal audit, you have it. And if the Ministry of Education asks for an internal audit, so it's sort of, you're complying with 3 sets of requirements at the same time. So it's not hard. It's creating that matrix that you can show how you're fulfilling all these requirements. But you have to look at it in a
Holistic way.
yeah, and have the open-mindedness that you can quickly be able, so you create a correlation matrix when you start doing it and say, you know what, I've done half the work already, I already have it when I'm complying with this authority, or so it's a matter of looking at it in that way and then being able to delegate and say, okay, I need help in this technical area, or I need help in that area. So you need to recognize where your weaknesses are and decide, and looked at time, because you can say I can do this in a year, but realistically you can't. So like we took 2 years, because that was 2004, we got it in 2006, and we were the 5th company to get ISO 9001. But you had to document it, you had to implement it, and when you're implementing, then you realize, oh, it's not really working like how I said it would work. You have to go and revise the documentation, and then you can carry out internal audit. So it is a lot of work, but you have to have a buy-in from everybody, because purchasing has to follow requirements, sales, every department, advertising, me being here, everything you do has to meet the end goal, and everything is a process approach. How you start all the way, how you finish, and what are your performance indicators. It's I know I'm talking ISO a lot.
No,
but
no, no,
it's
no,
everything.
no,
Talking
this
straight
is
to
your-
you again. That's all right.
Um,
People got to get it.
Mrs.
Go with the flow.
Mrs. Chanderban, we want to feature you because we think you're a good example of what Guyanese women entrepreneurs should be. Please feel free, and you
You're
just
teaching
flow.
us.
You
You're
just
teaching us,
Well,
right?
you
well,
just
well,
flow. You
I
just
started
flow.
off with your question about if there were challenges with the mail, but I was telling you the buy-in, the instructions were coming from the board. They want to see us being the premier, and we were doing it. So you had, like I said, we did training for LIAT, so we had to go and assist them with selection, students from Antigua, St. Vincent, Barbados, and they came to our school.
Wow.
And
That's
the thing
good.
is, we did it 4 years in Trinidad for about 20 Trinidadian students on another apprenticeship program. But it's a 3-way program that you have to do theoretical training according to the ICAO syllabus, International Civil Aviation Organization syllabus. We created projects which are not mandatory, but it makes it easy to learn. It's like how I'm here is competency-based training. My boss was a visionary, but he was
that?
Captain Janice at that time.
Mhm.
But he delegates, and the thing is, he didn't see barriers or ceilings or that I can't do this. And because of that, it sort of pushed me to say, so if he says I can do it, why not? So you try it. So if you're challenged enough, and if you think somebody see that you're capable, then you just start trying, and that a lot of this is me trying, and making sure that I can reach little goals. I started off and then set timelines, and then I was doing competency-based training, because when I had to do it, I had to do it myself, and when I had to improve it, I had to improve it myself. So when you do something like you bake a cake, you can do it, than somebody tell you how to do it and you've not done it yourself. But for me, almost everything I was involved, so I can sit back now and I can know what's happening in marketing or finance or in all the different departments, because I've done it all.
A woman at the head of our
I'm not going to.
organization. I like that.
I'm not. This is not a question that is going to come now. The question is going to come after I make this introductory remarks. When I read your CV, we were talking over the weekend, and I looked at this CV. You were very well trained, but not for a moment were you 2, 5, 6 years outside. And when I see people like you, and how you have contributed to Guyana, the aircraft industry, women in business, etc. When people like you open your mouth, we Guyanese should listen, because you have paid your dues. And I'm irritated when people with your kind of training are 20, 30 years outside, and they tell us what to do in here. They tell us what we should do with the oil industry, how we should stop it, how we should shape it, how the natural resource fund should be. It is people like you who should say, I can say this because I have worked in Guyana for 30 years. I want to ask you a question, and if you think you're uncomfortable with it, please, Gildarie, please come in. Whenever you think about this school, school that trains aeronautical engineering at the Eugene Correa Airport, you think about planes, helicopters, and safety. There was a huge write-up in the press in which a pilot refused to go to work because the helicopter was not had safety problems. A part that was not relevant or not that type that should have been on the helicopter was being used. And the Civil Aviation Authority investigated, condemned Air Service Limited or castigated them for safety regulation breaches, and the pilot was fired. Do you think you're uncomfortable with expanding on that, or you want to?
I won't speak on that specifically, but I think what you're trying to get is how I feel about that scenario. But the thing is, in aviation itself, be you a pilot, an aircraft engineer, or an accountable manager. And by the way, I'm the accountable manager. That's the term they call it in the Civil Aviation Authority. You are responsible, especially if your license is on the line. So that being said, if something happens, an incident or accident, you're accountable. And if it's your signature, especially in maintenance, and there's an investigation, you are answerable. For me, that's why safety and quality is so big with us. I'm the accountable manager. I take it seriously. But it's your personal choice. I mean, it's your name and your license. So you should decide if you want to compromise on safety or not. But I wouldn't speak to what happened between the parties.
If an aircraft company is rogue, maybe rogue is too heavy a word to use, but find to be breaching safety regulations, you would be the expert to tell me. Isn't there a law to?
That's why you have the Civil Aviation Authority,
and they can charge you.
And they have their accident investigation body. The Civil Aviation, I think, has the other company, the accident investigation.
Well, it is strictly regulated, very strictly. You have to have.
But what about criminal charges?
Well, I would speak to that. That is pending an investigation and who's liable and all of that. If you have regulations and requirements that you have adhered to, and you have audits and you show that you're doing things wrong, you're answerable. And they have consequences, they have steps that they have to take. But that is with the Civil Aviation Authority or whoever wants to take a law and take it further.
Who is Art Williams and Harry Wendt? That's the name of the school, Art Williams and Harry Wendt.
They are, one is a pilot, one an aircraft engineer, and they're the founders of the air transport in Guyana way back in the 1930s. So that's where the name came from.
They were both Europeans?
Yes. Well, they came in order to start with the British Guyana at that time. Mm-hmm. They had the amphibian flying boats in the Demerara River. So they were the persons that came and brought aviation and maintenance to Guyana. So this is why we held on to those two names.
But that's good. That's good.
We need to remember the history very soon.
Of course.
You tend to
give them the recognition.
You need to remember
we need
where
to
it came
remember
from.
People, yeah.
Because as long as there's air transport, there has to be maintenance. Because lives are at risk and you don't put a value to that. So you have to regulate it. So this is where, I think from early onset, and other sectors would find now that they're waking up to the fact that education is waking up to the fact that you need to have, proper guidelines. You might have an act. Do you have regulations? Do you have requirements? Do you have, you have to take it further. And speaking to that, we're on the threshold of signing an agreement with the Ministry of Labor, with the Board of Industrial Training, to look at more competency-based training throughout Guyana, expanding, because what we're doing, our curriculum covers engineering, land, sea, air, in terms of like hydraulic systems and fuel systems and what have you. So you have a lot of common modules. And the 4-year program, which is regulated by Civil Aviation Authority, 48 months of practicals. The syllabus is international. Some countries do 2 years full theory and then 2 years assigned to a hangar. We do it simultaneously. And the thing is, we're doing all 3 things at the same time on the job training. So the students are in the different hangars, getting experience. and being familiar. It's not like you're in a lab and then when reality hits you, you can't touch the plane because
On
you're
the job
scared.
training.
Right. So this is why we're unique, because you're doing it. Of course, it's monitored, it's supervised, and you create your logs, your practical experience, and with all of that happening now, we're able to cross from aviation to oil and gas with the common modules as well as agriculture.
Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Very
So this
interesting.
is why the students, and then the big thing is the accreditation, because you're going for a license, but you're complying with the other steps in education. You get an associate degree. So if you want to go to a bachelor's and a master's, and you want, and it's a whole sector. It's quality system. It's uh, working at the authorities, it's safety management systems, and all those. There's a lot of careers. This is just a path to get into those careers. You can be an aircraft engineer, but you want to move into a different direction. It's a whole sector. Their jobs, you can be an engineer, but you can have a different.
I know engineers who become pilots, and those are things. I know the industry how it works. We've been talking over the recent years about sports tourism, and the possibility people travel to see cricket matches, and people travel to see tennis matches and so on in Guyana. We would have seen CPL and what is done for Guyana. We've started talking about medical tourism in Guyana now, that people could come here and they could get medical, interventions here at our hospitals. What about aviation tourism? People coming to the actual school. Do you have numbers that you could tell us about that people are actually coming to Guyana, flying to Guyana because we have a specialist school?
Well, you don't have large numbers because
But we do have.
we
they
do
come.
have, yeah, we have students, and like I said, because we've been training for the different islands, the school is known, and we had in the past students from Paris, Angola. We've had students from Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, um, all over the Caribbean, and our graduates are employed in all over the Caribbean and overseas because the license is international. So the numbers are not large, but it's there, and you still have the fact that people may go to a school in the U.S., or Canada or wherever, and then they come. But when we started back in, I think was 2008, and then we did it in 2012, the Guyanese students who were on attachment. So what you had in the Caribbean region, you had maintenance, it's HX, C-checks at Liat, even at Caribbean Airlines, and they needed students at CGIA. So we second students there. And when you had a turnaround, pre-flight, post-flight at Timeri, it's our graduates, it's our students, even in the third year and second year. And so during that time was a lot of secondment. So you had them attached to a different hangar, a few of them going to Liat, in the different islands. And then over the years, they became employed. So what had happened that they sort of grab all the Guyanese, or, if they send Trinidadians or Jamaicans, they got the jobs. And it's sort of on a pause because the jobs have been filled up. But now you have those same people move into oil and gas. So again, you're going to create another flow of attachment, training new people. So it's just a general cycle, but at the same time, the school is involved in all the training.
It's a big scope there.
Yes,
I mean,
because
see
now
that.
you're not looking at aviation, you're looking at all these other sectors. That's what I was talking about. The Ministry of Labor is saying, can you take your training in the different regions? We do marketing in all the regions, those that we can reach, region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, but we have to try to get to like region 7 and 8 and 9. So what we do is send packages to schools, because initially nobody knew there was a school in Guyana. Or that
Somebody's
something was
asking about
happening
where
at
the
Togo.
school is located. At what used to be the Ogle Airport, the Eugene C. Karai Airport now, that is at Ogle. That's where the school is located. Freddie?
Yeah. This school, does it offer scholarships, or students have to pay their way?
They have done office scholarship in the past, but generally students pay because it's a school that has its overheads, and it's a private sector organization that has to manage itself.
So you to cater for 1 and 2 persons from Rupununi who would like to be an engineer, Guyana is huge. Region 1.
Yeah. What has
region-
happened? What has happened?
Giving a
As
scholarship or 2 to.
we have done that. The school has done that in the past, And what has happened in the last maybe 7 years or so, the public service ministry has started sponsoring students. So I wrote a nice letter way back and say plead the cases of the parents, because you have to look at housing if they're coming, and where they're gonna live, and how they're gonna stay for 4 years. Because you might
It's a
have
4-year program.
it's well back then was 3 years, and
Yeah,
now
now it's 4
it's
years.
4 years. But the reason for that is that all the categories are licensed. You have fixed wing, rotary wing. You have large planes, small planes. So you had there was a need, and when we wrote the public service ministry, we were able to get assistance for students, and that's how we got more students being sponsored from those other areas.
But the Williams went school. How, is there any program or plan in the future to finance working class students who need a break, and
Well,
you
this is
you
what
provide accommodation, you provide
there are
tuition.
plans. They have plans, but like every plan, you have to plan how you're gonna get the money and over what period of time. Because to house students, you have to create dorms, and it's not just creating dorms; it's how you're gonna manage those people. You're talking about adult or teens, and in a regulated airport, you have restrictions in the sense that what can happen outside of the airport. It's highly regulated in the sense of airside and landside restrictions. So you don't want living happening, in that kind of situation. But there are plans in terms of where the school is going, building larger classrooms, more because of the size, and over the years, we see the classes getting larger. For now, we are able to sort of break it up into little groups for when they're doing the practicals and what have you. But definitely they're looking at those things. But I can't speak to exactly what the plans are.
Okay.
They are.
Who owns the Art Williams Heritage? It's a private school.
It's a private school. It's owned by shareholders. There are 7 shareholders.
The 7 shareholders. You would it's not within your remit to discuss
No,
this.
because this, I think, the show is about me and my role.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fine. Anything you're uncomfortable with?
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, that's,
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know what had frightened me a couple of years back when I learned that some of the students, and I think we now have a clear understanding how this whole thing works. Civil aviation as a regulator make sure that that all the rules and regulations are followed, and then there's system and procedures that has to be followed at the various institutions. Do you know that, Freddie Kissoon? Do you know that and I think it was said by our guest today, that the repairs, the servicing of the aircraft are done many times by the students, overlooked by instructors and so on, and other colleagues who would have been involved in the industry. I used to be frightened when I learned that, because I said, hey, you can't make this not like a car that you fix in and wrong, it broke down, it left right there. You're actually in the air, you can't afford to make a mistake. Anything that you do, all the filters and everything, all the glasses and everything, whatever is there on the plane, there's no room for error there. But we now learning that this is not just a guesswork that you're having, that you actually have people looking over your shoulders. Have you done this? And everything that you do, you're signing off on it.
we have duplicate inspections in some
Right.
places.
So you just can't change the filter. Everything
And
there
then
is.
you have the quality department that will come and check it again.
Uh-huh.
That is the other check. So you have in every maintenance company, you have the huge quality department that create the work pack and would say to stores, you need to get up these things and get the crew and what has to happen in the heavy maintenance, whatever inspection is happening that night or evening. And supervision happens, work is checked and double checked, and then quality has to check it again too. So it's not just one tier, 2 tier. You have all of that check and balances.
I want to ask, so my question here, and again along the lines of capacity building, how much business is involved that Guyana could possibly get from what is happening with this oil and gas? Because we're talking a lot of
But
helicopter work and so on.
Yeah, but that is most of the work is done in the sense that you have a license and you already have, two categories, is getting the rotograph, the small R1 or R2, which is the larger rotograph license. But all these licenses, you have to have 6 months experience. So this is where now the door is being opened to some companies. As Air Services has allowed students to do their practical work. You observe, you have different levels. A year one would only do observation or corrosion cleaning or whatever. A year two would do. So they would have to build 6 months of experience before you can,
Actually
even
work
think.
in the aircraft.
And then you're going for basic license. We're not talking type ratings. That's another level when you're talking about aircraft type, engine type, airframe type. So license, civil aviation, you have basic license and then you have type ratings. This is when you go higher. Training never stops because the moment you stop, another aircraft is out or another operator bring another fleet with a different, requirements, different engines, and then you want to have type training on that because the aircraft has to fly and an engineer has to sign off work. So it never stops.
The your graduates have sought employment in this.
They're not sitting around. They're not sitting around.
No, from the huge companies outside.
Oh,
as
they
well.
have, and as far as I know, a lot are employed. And there's not a huge
Caribbean
demand.
Airlines have a few.
The Caribbean Airlines had 50 Guyanese last one time we checked. I don't know how many have left and gone to oil.
Gildarie?
In the servicing department?
In maintenance and in all the little sub departments, but
Uh-huh.
back then I remember up to when we stopped. A few years back they had about 50, yeah. And you're talking, there are different departments, line maintenance and heavy maintenance, and But yeah, Guyanese are all over. Graduates.
So
are
you
all
can
over.
you can find graduates from the Williams Went School at Tamari. The
Always. Almost everybody has passed through the school. We trained for the Army since 1999, Air Corps. So you have in the Air Corps, all the the chief engineer, everybody are graduates of the school. And we're training now for the Guyana Police Force. They have about 3 persons.
Well, what do the police force have?
Well, I can't
Police force
speak for
have
them,
aircraft?
but no, but they've sponsored students. Yeah.
Okay.
Guyana
Maybe-
Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force.
Well, obviously.
No, I know the
Public-
defense force.
public
I
service
know
ministry.
police would have riverine vehicles, but
But wouldn't it be nice to have an engineer that can, if you put him in a department to check something, he's an engineer you can speak to?
I think
Building capacity.
Well,
think
I
is
That's what
think-
you talk. You have to think wider.
well, Ms. Chanderban and Leonard, is the time the police force have a few aircraft?
No, obviously, but it has
there's a big shootout
Oh.
in one of the regions, Region 1, Region 8. You're going to rely on the Army to fly in the detectives.
No, there's always going to be up
it?
in the air. But if the problem is we've never had the capacity, the resources. Where do you put the resources limited that you would have had? Now that we're talking real oil money, you got to start thinking with these things because obviously the police got to start building. They got to have more riverine capacity.
Or if you have joint
right.
services,
Of course,
working,
police must be
yeah.
able to have the
Yeah,
capacity
they
to do
should.
that.
They should be able
And we
to
know
jump on
that.
the helicopter.
Of course.
And, because
Somebody probably saw that already, and that's why it's happening.
I think it's going to
but that's
happen.
when you said that, I'm thinking, I know we didn't have the money in the past, but when you look at crime in this country, especially in a place in my columns refer to as Chatto's Land. You may be too young to know that famous movie with Charles Bronson. Right, in which anything goes on in Chatto's Land. It seems to me in these gold mining areas, anything goes. You drink, you drunk, you kill, you have your little gold thing, people come rob you, kill you. And that thing about the police may be the beginning of police having their 1 or 2 helicopters.
Remember, you can have a license, you can be an aircraft engineer, and you can be working in a totally different sector. Once you have anything that meshes with engineering, and you have a school here that is so recognized, so accredited. I mean, like I said, we're the only institution accredited in Guyana. And when you come from that,
Well,
and
you said the
that does-
Caribbean.
the Caribbean, yeah, because we have institutional, it speaks to the institution, not just the program. But all that we do has strict quality control. And when you come from such an institution, it's like when you say, oh, you graduated from Yale or one of those prestigious colleges. It's what it does for the country, what it does for you, what it does for the, the industry or the workplace that wants to hire you, make you marketable. So this is where the vision came from, that these students haven't spent 3 years, 4 years, and they only get a license. What about if they want to go into any management system, or then they got to start back from scratch to get a degree, go back and do maths and statistics and what have you, and you've done most of it in this program. So this is where we push for accreditation. So we're issuing an associate degree that moves, you're sort of halfway to get a bachelor's, and it's accredited. So any prospective employer or somebody in a different country can say, oh, where you came from, Art Williams, who are they? Let me call Guyana and ask about that school. And this is why, we're proud of that.
You wrote some safety manuals for the school. What are those safety manuals, and why should I sit up and take notice? What are those?
Those manuals are how everything we do involves risk. I am sitting here as an entrepreneur, but I don't take the risk. The shareholders of the company, they're taking the risk. So the thing is, you have a risk when you start a business. Is it going to last or not? You employ people. So even with a product or service, to do it, to make it, you have the risk involved. Everything you do, coming here, and the risk involved in me being here on time and all of that. So in order to make sure that you reach your destination in terms of 4 years and getting an associate degree and a license, what are the different factors that can affect that? Mm-hmm. What can prevent that from happening? How can we have a product or raw material? We start with a graduate from a high school with 5C Sec, and we want to make them into an aircraft engineer. What are all the different issues that may, come in the path of that, in the process approach that we have? And this is why the safety manual came about. It was a requirement when we got the Trinidad Civil Aviation Authority approval. Back then it was just, oh, you need a quality manager. And the requirement says you need a accountable manager, a quality manager, and a head of training. And you have a school. Those are like the fixed positions. But for Trinidad, they wanted a safety manual. They wanted to see safety. And right away, when we start looking at all the other requirements, when I'm looking at accreditation and ISO, they speak to safety management system. So that's where I went when we went to Antigua, Liat, and I did that safety management course. So it sort of is how you're gonna address the different risks involved in ensuring that at the end of 4 years, this child conforms. And what are your indicators? Are they falling out? Are they doing 2,000 practical hours by the end of year one? Are they getting 600 hours by year two? Have they filled out their logbooks? You don't wait then and say, oh, but you have no logbooks to show you. I took your money, goodbye. We don't do that. That's why you have it, so you can say religiously, you can monitor the process, and we can look at them and say, you see, at this stage you have to have 10 courses or
Right,
how many
right.
theory, you have to have so many practical hours, you have to have all your logbooks. And it's sort of, we quantify it because that's how we were able to measure it, that we want to see 2,000 practical hours, and we want to see how you're doing. And at least half of that must be captured in log entries as your experience, stamped and signed by an aircraft engineer that yes, you certified you worked on a plane and you worked on this system, and it was checked, and you have the registration number and everything. So now you take that to the authority to get your license. And that's how the policing happens with this.
Right.
They set the exams, they give the license. So we can't carry an end product, like if you're looking at a product like a tangible item, you can see if it's deformed. How do you look at a service or a person as the product and the training they would have received? How do you measure that? That's what safety management system is all.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're featuring you, and I could understand how you've come a long way from 30 years back. Leonard, I was going through, in keeping with our motto of having women in business, I'll tell you how the conversation started with me and Mrs. Chanderban. I was going through who's who in business, and I got 7 turn downs from 7 women entrepreneurs. I'm going through the who's who in business. And when I reached to Miss Chanderban, she was very positive. She said, yes, I don't mind coming on the program. I'm speaking about my experience. I will have to consult my board. 7 of them, I could tell you, said, oh my, I don't know if I'm ready for the publicity. And these are people who run businesses. And it's important for them to come on a very well-watched program to talk about their business. And their business will be given 1 hour of free publicity that they would have to pay an enormous sum for in just one ad in the newspapers. And 7 of them quite pleasantly said, I don't know if I could, I don't know if I got to go in front of you, and this thing is live. And when I called Mrs. Chanderban, she said, yes, I don't mind, let me and she consulted her board, and here she is. So let's talk about Nalini Chanderban. Gildarie, is there anything you want to say about Ms.
Obviously,
Chanderban, about Ms. Chanderban?
you're not only an executive, somebody who's running an organization that's so very critical to the aviation industry, but you're also a mom. You're Guyanese. How does that all work out for you? How do you balance the balancing act?
Quite a juggle, but I have defined my role in the different areas. So that's why my husband is doing something completely different from what I'm doing. And my kids, well, I'm all about education. And I think that came from my background of my parents reading a lot and sort of reading. Reading. My father, when I was young, all the Louis L'Amour books, you would go to the market and exchange books. And all the fancy, well, we started with Robert Ludlum and going to Dan Brown, and you're going. So it was a passion for reading, and I think that sort of transcends to my kids. And that's the conversation. So it's quite interesting at home, and then you start, it's sort of feeding into that, and you're doing puzzles in your spare time, and sort of creative, and I'm very involved in their education, and all the way nursery, primary, secondary, now college. So
with all your busy schedule.
Yeah, no. I balance it. I make time for I need to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, and this is when you're very humble. She is not going to tell you that one of her kids happened to be. She said it. You say it. You say it.
Oh, she's an Olympic weightlifter, female.
Olympic weightlifter, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, we want you to promise us, not say that you will look into it, you will explore the possibility.
She's looking. I think she would.
Please ask this young lady to come here. Guyana's leading powerlifter was supposed to be here as a guest. She got caught in Ministry of Education project in Lenora. I believe that people would find it very interesting to see this young Olympic powerlifter. No, she must.
Olympic weightlifter. Yes,
Olympic weightlifter. She must. When is she going to be on a competition that?
Well, she's hoping to do something this year, but right now it's competition happening in the Pan American Games, and I've been to some of the training because she got sponsored by the U.S. Olympic team, and she had training in Texas. I went to Miami, Miccosukee.
Is she making the news here? Is she making the news here?
She was in some of the gold medals. She was in the sports sections, but I would tag along because sometimes she's kind of timid because she's still young.
You stay in the bleachers and
I'm in the photos with all the athletes.
She's timid. She got a person who's into power is timid. Power is power.
You go to placards and things like that? No? That's my daughter?
I'm in the background screaming, but
okay.
So she's an Olympic powerlifter. No, she's got to come here. This program is not only about. We've had sports people here.
Well, she created a special path for herself in mentoring, guidance counseling, and sports and exercise science. So she's doing her master's in exercise science and human performance.
Interesting, and those are areas not traditional.
It's working. Yeah, you can work with in medical areas in terms of working with kids or veterans or whoever, but you can also work with sports organization or colleges and athletes and persons in training. So she does that because she likes it, and at the same time that's her passion and it's her hobby too. So she's studying that. Yeah.
Well, I see in your curriculum vitae, if I could, that you like history, you like You like history?
Well, that again is from my dad because he would, all these books about Corsica and whatever. So it's like, where is that and where is, so all of these things you have to
Corsica,
go, yeah.
which is an island off of the
It is
France.
something-
So
off the
initially
coast of
he would
France.
just call a country
It's
and say,
ruled by
need,
France.
yeah, we need to look up this. But yeah, it's I would look at documentaries and those kind of
So
things. In the little spare time that I get, but not much.
I see
Yeah.
you've listed one of your interests is religion. You have a Hindu name. Are you Hindu?
I am a Hindu.
And
A practicing Hindu.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I
So,
don't go to the mandir all the
have
time,
you
but
ever-
I have
Which-
my
where's your
mandir at home.
mandir?
Manipur Shiv Mandir.
Oh, okay. My daughter has a Hindu name. I have one child, Kavita. What's your daughter's name?
Well, they all have their Hindu names in the middle. So she's Mavani, was Crystal Mavani Chanderban. So
Okay.
yeah, and my other daughter is Brianna Manisha Chanderban.
Oh,
And my
okay.
son is Brandon Krishna Chanderban.
Ms.
So they have their
Chanderban,
Hindu names.
you have over the last hour or so spoke about a family which seems to be very much of a Guyanese family. We hear often about the American dreamers. So, but we've always wondered what the Guyanese dream is all about. So, what really what's the definition of that?
I
What would
think-
you say? I would want to ask you. Maybe you could comment on that. But I would want to ask you in our closing. Got a couple of minutes here. What would you say to our young ladies in Guyana who are looking for role models, who want to aspire to greater things? What would you say to them?
Well, you must study what you love. And that's what I encourage my kids to do. Because I told you, my son is studying data analyst. He's an analyst. Another one is doing sports and exercise science. My third child is looking at communication. She's looking at media. She's looking at art. So whatever you like doing, whatever is your passion, or it could be art, it could be baking, it could be whatever. Make it your area of study. So and everything is a huge area because you see what's happening in Guyana. Everybody's important. The cleaners, the painters, everybody's important. So whatever you like to do, there is a path, a higher path that you can study. And of course, there are no shortcuts. You have to
Hard work.
You have to do due diligence. You need to study. You need to put in the work. You need to listen to your parents. Well, I'm religious in a sense that to me it gives me discipline and comfort. But find what defines you or what makes you happy and stick with it. And of course, you have to be tolerant because if you want a quick change and you want it too fast, that's when you start, you start trying several things and you're not sticking with one. But if you're passionate about something, you got to stick with it a while. And if it can't happen how you want it, you got to create your own. For me,
Words
that's
of
what I
advice here.
did.
Freddie Kissoon, quickly wrap it up.
Well, I want to wrap up with Mrs. Chanderban. First, I like her spirit when she reacted to me about the invitation, and I think people should be like that. People should go out and define themselves and tell the world who they are. There is a saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Ms. Chanderban came here, and thousands of people would know there is a lady named Nalini Chanderban. She's the CEO of the Caribbean's only engineering aeronautical school. She is a woman who have brought up 3 children despite her busy schedule because she said her children's education is important. But I would like to conclude by saying, when I read Mrs. Chanderban's history and when I speak to her, those are the kind of people I would listen to when they tell us, don't put a building in Essequibo. Put it in Barbies. Don't put it in Barbies. Put it in Garden of Eden, because they have stayed here, worked here, contributed here. They're Guyana's unsung heroes. And let them determine where we who live in Guyana go.
Thank you very much for that, Freddie. It summed it up very nicely. It isn't always going to be the sexy thing, and I use that word very deliberately, to have a politician bick us out and we talk things that sound really nice. We have to pay attention to the people, as Freddie Kissoon would have said, the unsung heroes, the people who work and toil in the background and nobody pays really attention or write the stories. And these are the people who have also, little brick at a time, build this country, and we build in it. And we will continue to tell those stories because they need to be told. So it doesn't have to be sexy, but they are the stories that need to be told. And we will be telling them in the people's voices, in the words that they have. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I want to say thank you very much to our guest, Nalini Chanderban, one of the persons who's doing her thing very quietly, but making waves and maybe making a lot of noise from the helicopters and those planes that she plays such a very important role in her work and her team's work, what they're doing. So wherever you are, I want to say good night to you. Thank you very much to my co-host Freddie Kissoon. Can be back with you on Wednesday. You stay safe on the roadways, and please, contractors, be a little more considerate. Do your work. We're paying attention. It's not happening very nicely, and we're not happy. Until then.